Dear citizens of America, as most of you already know, Hilary Clinton defeated Bernie Sanders in the California Democratic primary by 12.6 points on June 7, 2016. 55.8% for Hilary Clinton and 43.2% for Bernie Sanders. But recently leaked information shows mass election fraud across the state. The sheer mass of the election fraud that took place in California was staggering and is unlike anything we have seen in decades. It is estimated that 2 out of every 3 Bernie Sanders votes were not counted during the California primary election. We will explain in detail exactly how the election was rigged and provide our sources. Let's begin. The true results of the election is estimated to be 69% to 31% in favor of Sanders. This is a landslide 38-point victory for Bernie Sanders. So how did Hillary Clinton manage to siphon 50 points from Sanders? Using 3 simple election fraud methods simultaneously. Method 1. Bernie Sanders is heavily favored among NPP voters. In fact, this demographic is the main factor in Bernie Sanders' 38-point landslide victory. The Democratic Party ordered all NPP voters to use provisional ballots during the California election. And these ballots were thrown out and not counted toward the election. A newly trained California poll worker speaks out about her experience at her training session in the following footage.
Today, I had my poll worker training class to be a poll worker here in Orange County, California. It was a 3-hour class, mostly good until we got to the issue of NPP voters, which in California is no party preference voters. When we were going over NPP, I was told that all NPP voters are to be given provisional ballots. I specifically asked, I had my handbook open. Let me show you in my handbook. Okay, so right here, the ones in bold are the parties that are accepting no party preference voters to vote for them. However, I was told that these people were to be given provisional ballots. Always. NPP voters are always to be given provisional ballots. That's what I was told. I even wrote it right there in my notes at the bottom when I asked him the question. Well, I posted on some of the Bernie groups today because I was bothered by that, because I've always been told that these NPP voters here in California can vote for Democrats and that their vote would be counted. So I was a little worried that he was telling all 18 of us poll workers to give all NPP voters provisional ballots, because I mean, we all know what happens most of the time with the provisional ballots. They are not being counted.
It turns out she and all other poll worker trainees were being lied to. According to the county register's office, NPP voters must fill out a Democratic crossover ballot in order for the votes to count, not a provisional ballot. In other words, the trainees were told to give the incorrect ballots to NPP voters, and these ballots were unfortunately thrown out. Millions of Bernie Sanders votes were not counted.
So I've called the county registrar's office, and she's explained to me that we were given misinformation today in our training. Surprise, surprise, we were lied to. And that I am to issue, if a no party preference voter comes in and asks for a Democratic ballot, I am to give them what is called a Democratic crossover ballot. And so I said, okay, well, thank you for telling me that, because we weren't informed of crossover ballots today in our training whatsoever. They never even mentioned crossover ballots in the slideshow, and none of us were looking through the 90-page handbook. So it does talk about crossover ballots in our handbook, but in the training, the slideshow that the county registrar's office is using for their training does not discuss crossover ballots. So all these poll workers in California are being trained to give no party preference voters that want to vote Democratic provisional ballots. And that's crazy. So spread the word. I feel like I've caused an uproar. Hopefully they still want me to work the polls after this.
Method 2. Bernie Sanders is also heavily favored among young Americans and new voters. But many of these young or new voters were registered as Democrats during the voting process, so that fake ballot tricks could not work. Many young or new voters were instead purged completely, finding that their registrations had magically vanished or switched to Republican. Without the young voters, Bernie Sanders was forced to compete with Hillary with old Democratic voters, but these are Hillary's strongest demographics. This put Sanders at a crushing disadvantage. Method 3. Flipping the electronic voting machines. There are many reports of voting machine irregularities across the state. Poll workers in Los Angeles and Orange County report that Bernie won the electronic votes in the precincts by well over a 2-to-1 margin, the opposite of the result of the vote count. The contrast between this and the outcome is indicative of vote flipping. This resulted in another 7-figure number of Bernie Sanders votes not being counted. In fact, this is much worse. Millions of Bernie Sanders votes were actually counted as Hilary Clinton votes. This is sickening. Prior to going into the California primary, it was known that Sanders was going to insist that the Democratic National Convention nominate the winner of the California primary. Clinton is very unpopular in California, and it would have been impossible for her to acquire the votes to win legitimately. There was only one way for Clinton to win: to rig the election. Ask yourself, when Sanders gets enthusiastic crowds of tens of thousands in California, 60,000 according to police in Oakland alone, and Hillary Clinton can barely fill a classroom, how does Hillary win the county? Just look at Alameda County, Berkeley, Oakland, where Sanders was greeted by 100,000 active supporters, where Clinton is very unpopular, and where the percentages appear to be the exact reversal of what the residents of that county suggested. Ask yourself why an excited crowd of thousands came to the election night speech of a loser, when this kind of crowd has never come to the event of a primary loser in California's history. Those running the Democratic Party have made it clear. Following the known rigging of elections in other states, they don't care if a candidate wins this way. The Democratic Party either don't care, or are too dumb to realize that they are handing the White House to Donald Trump by sending a fake candidate into the general election. It is up to you, the people, to fight for justice at the Democratic Convention. Bring out your petitions and fight at the Democratic Convention. Please spread this information and demand justice for democracy. Thank you for watching.